Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're going to call to order this 39th special session. Need a motion to go into special session, please.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
That was fast.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, special section. The first piece of business is introduction of an ordinance amending Chapter 197 rental facilities of the city code.
Oh, you want me to read this?
I see you're dying to do it.
Yeah, you love it.
No, I don't. Somehow I get these by like default.
You win.
You read fast.
We voted.
I hereby move for the mayor and city council to introduce an ordinance to amend the code, City of Hagerstown, Chapter 197, rental facilities. Specifically, the amendments will, 1, add dormitory and residential care facility to the definition of rental unit and define each established license fees for dormitory and residential care facility at $100 plus $10 per unit. 2, revise inspection schedule for rooming houses from annual exterior inspection and interior inspection every 48 months to all conducted every 36 months, and add dormitory and residential care facility to the same schedule. 3, revise inspection schedule for dwelling units from annual exterior inspection and interior inspection at tenant turnover, but never more frequently than every 48 months to all inspections every 36 months upon scheduling by the city. 4, add a right of entry provision for staff and landlords to gain access via administrative warrant if access is denied for inspections and repairs, and include provisions that such entry for inspection be included in the terms of the lease. 5, revise inspection for new construction from 48 months following issuance of UNO permit to 36 months, and add an exemption for existing units renovated to Partners in Economic Progress standards for 36 months following issuance of UNO permit. Revise provisions for what may lead to denial, suspension, or revocation of a license to include providing false or misleading information in the application and denying access for inspections. This revision includes adding a reinstatement fee of $500 for any suspended or revoked license. 7, add provision requiring notification of transfer of license to new owners or new agents and a transfer fee of $25 per license. These amendments are consistent with the city's vision and commitment for housing in neighborhoods and the community city center plan. Mayor and council direct staff to give first priority for the new inspection process to those units which have never been inspected in the program.
I'll second, Mayor.
Okay. Discussion. Keep in mind, this is only introduction, but go ahead.
Well, I would like to recommend that we discuss this further before we go any further with it. I think some of the, and I know we've discussed it before, but I'm having second thoughts about the going from 48 months to 36 months. I don't really see what the benefit is of that, and I think there's a couple of things in here that I would, for instance, in the right of entry, I think the landlord must be present whenever a property is inspected. I don't think we want to get a warrant and have city personnel go in without the landlord present.
That was clarified in an email to you, to you all from staff, that would not take place.
Okay.
It is not the plan that staff is going to go in without the landlord present.
I would just note, if I'm correct with what you said, Mayor, this is the introduction, which means it's going to have to be brought up again
Right.
for another vote, and I would concur that if this were the final vote, I'd move the table. But because it isn't, I wouldn't do that. I think that a lot has been lit under this. This flame has been lit because of the true problem landlords that have appeared in front of us and the problems that we see. I think, however, and I think Shelley has mentioned it more than once that I've heard, it's time that we address the other side of that fence, which is the landlords that have established themselves as not being a problem at all. So I again would reiterate that, one, when we do this, you know, I don't know when we're gonna get around to inspecting any place that hasn't been inspected, when I hear how long we've had this program and 25% of the rental units have never been seen. So I would like to think that units that have been inspected and passed need to go to the bottom of the list, because the other thing, when I hear that we're gonna do this every 36 months, I don't hear that we're gonna do it every 36 months. I mean, we said we were gonna do it, what, every 48 months? And we didn't, did we?
That would have to be a question you would have to ask.
Well, if we
We
did it every
didn't- we did
48
not
months,
have-
we wouldn't have 25% of the rental units never being seen, would we?
We didn't have a systematic inspection system at all. So that it was based upon them telling us. That's why
The
this
turnover
is
has actually
changing.
occurred.
Tenant turnover
Yes.
is what kicks it no
What
more
staff is-
frequently than 48
We're going
Yeah,
to a
what staff's saying is the
systematic.
utility billing is indicating that tenant turnover is actually occurring in these units you're referring to and not being, and the
Reported.
city's not being notified or
Right.
reported to.
Okay. I also think there needs to be I'm guessing that what we're going to find if we do some sort of statistical study, I could be wrong about this, but I'm guessing we're going to find apartments and rental units, the quality of them directly associated with either the ownership or the management that is taking care of those places. I would, yeah, I'd be surprised if we look at 3 of Austin's rental units and find 2 of them horrible and 1 of them great. And I think with that, we need to get a system so that these landlords that have been doing reporting and have been having inspections and having passed them either entirely or substantially. I think about looking at the newspaper with the health department reports of the restaurants. Those people need to be put in a different place than the people who are the exact opposite. That every time we've been to their place, it's either failing, and I'm not talking about strainers in the sink, on either end of these things. And I think we really need to look at that. We have taken the approach of what we need to do to get the problem landlords in order. My biggest fear is that in all these years we've been working to do this, what we've accomplished to do is regularly inspect a lot of landlords that aren't a problem and miss the ones that are. And that's my big concern right now.
And I've sent, as we all know, I've sent, very good examples of a tiered structure in different, municipalities that would, we could make it our own, of course. And, I think that, exactly what you said, Lou, why there's no reason to put everyone in the same bucket, because there are very good landlords that don't deserve, to have a stricter and more stringent inspection cycle. So, which I've said many times, so.
So I don't think that we should vote on this tonight. I think we need to have more conversations. And also, I know we've been going back and forth about.
You can
having
make a
public
motion to
meeting.
table.
Okay, well, I
To
moved to table.
postpone. Make a
Second.
motion to postpone,
Just
would be
table.
more correct.
Table it.
Okay,
Motion to postpone.
then I make a motion to postpone.
I second that.
Okay, then there can be.
Any discussion on the motion to postpone? All in favor to postpone?
Aye.
Motion passed.
Emily and Shelley.
I would like to schedule a public meeting, though, that we've been going back and forth through an email. I know you can't do the 8th, the 15th is the tax meeting. We can do the 22nd, if that's okay with everyone, but.
That's a late meeting. That's a late meeting. We wouldn't want it after.
We can do the 8th. I mean, I know that Kristen won't be available, but
Yeah, I gotta tell you, I don't know when you wanna do it. Like Memorial Day is fast approaching, and then holidays and the summer is here. I just don't know that you're gonna, if you're gonna do it, you're probably not gonna do it with full council.
No, well, I understand.
Sometime until the end of the summer.
I understand.
It gives us enough feedback, I think. We're really listening
I
more
mean,
than speaking.
if we can, if we can have the
And I mean, I have no problem
availability
with
of
that.
Donna
You all
to be
know
there,
me.
because we'll have a quorum on the 8th. You can't be there.
I've already got another commitment.
I think just have something. We can live
Well,
stream
we
it,
don't have
right?
to do the
on
8th. I mean,
Facebook.
that's a week from now. We can figure out a
If it
different.
was here, then it could be video recorded. That's why I mentioned it just to have it here, and that would make it, that would be the simplest way to have it.
tax meeting, the tax
I think you
hearing.
get the same people here that you get.
Yeah, I
Public
agree.
hearing, the public
I
tax
do
hearing.
too.
We have it
Just have it here
at
after
our
our,
regular meeting on the 15th as an agenda item.
No, but Emily's talking about, you're talking about a public meeting like we had at Elgin Station, is
Yeah.
that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I just thought if we did it outside of City Hall, people might feel more comfortable, but we don't, I mean, we can,
I'm just curious why we wouldn't do that as a regular meeting item.
Well, because we want to hear from, the public.
I know, but I'm trying to figure out what the difference is between parking and walking into Elgin Station and parking and walking.
Well, I think
into here.
Emily's point is the fact that she feels like people would feel more comfortable being at Elgin Station and,
I mean,
rather.
if you wanna do it at City Hall where it can be recorded and live streamed, that's fine, but I just wanted an opportunity for people to be able to talk or share ideas or concerns.
I mean, I could have coffee at the Gourmet Goat, and listen, so.
Who are we inviting and what are we discussing?
Well, we want to invite landlords, and one of the questions I had was, do we have a database of email addresses for all the landlords in the city that we could notify them of the opportunity?
there is a database, I know Kathy.
My vision
Wait,
would.
there's Paul.
We only have 60% of the landlord's email information.
Okay.
And if I can ask. when
Or you
you're
could
ta-
just go through a landlord association and
when you-
invite them.
When you're talking about that, can you remind us what percentage of landlords live in the state of Maryland? Do we know?
I don't remember offhand,
But it was a pretty high percentage, is that right?
75% approximately.
I just wanted to provide an opportunity for people to share their concerns, especially with the pot stirring that's been happening regarding this, and there's a lot of untrue information being spread. I thought it would be a good idea to allow people to share their concerns and to clear up misconceptions. Also get their perspective on how it would impact their business having to do every 36 months or whatever that looks like.
Well, I'm
And you could-
interested in hearing ideas from landlords too, as to the tiered inspection examples and that, I'd like for the good landlords to tell us how they would like to be governed and see other landlords governed that aren't the good landlords.
But it's, and I know Valerie sent this out in an email, and I tend to agree, it's one thing to reach out to a community and have a conversation with the community about an item. Just a project or anything. But, I mean, this is a legislative action and a fairly important one. And as much as you say, I'd like to hear from the landlords, you're gonna take that conversation outside of this sort of citizen perspective, to have that conversation about legislation that affects the citizenry that
It's current legislation
is
that you're
attuned
working
to
on.
the actions of the body at this table.
I mean, it could be a work session item, like you mentioned, Councilman. It could actually, normally you don't take citizens' comments during work sessions.
I think
but you
that's the only
clearly-
difference.
But you can clearly do that. You amend your agenda to say, this is gonna be the time for the work
That
session
seems reasonable.
comments.
Yeah.
And then we have a record of it, and then, you're gonna be voting, you have legislation tonight, you're gonna be voting, once you take it off the postponement, you're gonna be bringing it back for consideration, so, I think it would be best to have it in your council chambers.
I would only suggest that if we're gonna do this, that if we're inviting landlords to speak, that the request should be of how we can improve the system as they see it.
And no complaints.
Well, no complaints, but if I've yet to meet with many landlords who think the solution to this is anything but getting rid of the program. So that's my only point. If we're
I stated a couple weeks ago at this table that when landlord registration was first instituted, it was done very diligently and with the input of landlords and homeowners, everybody. I mean, it didn't happen in a period of a month. It happened in a period of about 6 months. And staff worked with landlords and on language and things like that. This is, I mean, I understand it's not the whole program, but it's a pretty big chunk when you talk about inspection dates and you talk about, you know, and I know that staff says they're not gonna enter into a residence without a landlord present, but clearly states right here they can. And,
Yeah, but that's with the warrant we're talking about. I mean, the landlord doesn't need to be present if the tenant lets the city in. Or you think otherwise, that the landlord must be present?
What I'm saying is, the language in this ordinance states, whereas the mayor and council desire to set forth the authority of the city code administration to enter into rental properties for the purpose of inspection, whether by the consent of the owner and/or tenant, or by seeking an administrative warrant.
So if some of these landlords live out of town and we're expecting the landlord to be there, live
Or an
out of
authorized
state.
representative.
Right, it could be an
Gotcha.
agent of the
Property
landlord.
Property manager, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Got ya.
Yeah, is the goal to hear comments from interested parties beyond the scope of the points of which this ordinance is considering? In other words, you got seven fairly
No, I think it ought to
specific
stick to
points here.
the points in the ordinance.
Well, I think, though, that this ordinance doesn't discuss a two-tiered system or multi-tiered system.
Does not
all.
at this point.
And to me, in not discussing that. and
Well,
not-
getting input on something like that, I think.
Yes.
That was not my intention. What I wanted was, we had a public meeting in January that people could come. It snowed. We still had a pretty decent turnout, but we said we were gonna try to do it once a quarter. Well, it's time for that quarter anyway.
But that kind of public meeting should certainly not be limited to landlords. It
No,
should
and
be
I don't think
invited
it should-
tenants
I don't-
also, renters.
Absolutely. No, I agree with that. I didn't think it should just be landlords only. I thought it should just be, but we should invite them because this topic is important right now. But there's lots of other things, the tiered tax, and I'm sure people want to talk about that and other items that are going on. In my mind, I didn't mean it should be just limited, but
Well, when we talk about the tiered tax, we're gonna have a public hearing for the tax thing
I was
coming
just
up.
using that as an example of a hot
And-
topic. I mean,
And I would say this, Emily, you're right, a hot topic. And I know about the meeting we had for the new development going out in Cedar Ridge, and I anticipate that what you'll have, Cedar Lawn, that you'll have a very similar issue of people saying how this is a horrible place to do business, and other people getting up and saying landlords are horrible, and if you don't inspect, and I'm not sure that it's gonna be something to progress legislation. I think that's just an open forum to have people come and discuss it. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it.
but shouldn't we take those opinions and keep them in mind as we're discussing legislation, making major changes to this program? If the program's not working and we want to make it better, I think we should seek input.
Well, and my only thought on that is if you were gonna seek input from bona fide representatives of people, I would say that's appropriate. But, you know, if you have 6,000 renters and you have 7 show up at a meeting and you have 1,000 landlords and you have 10 show up at a meeting, you're not getting that input that you would from somebody who's representing a group. But I'm not saying we shouldn't do it.
But it's better than getting no input. It's better to give them a chance to say something rather than not allowing them to say anything.
Well, I think it's a misnomer to say we haven't allowed folks to say anything.
But not in a public, not in like a, well,
Well, I
okay,
mean,
once a
they're able
month.
to- Yeah, I mean, they're,
But still, I mean, if there was an
on any
organized
matter
event.
before the city, any individual is more than welcome to come in and speak during.
Well,
You're
more
right.
important than that, I mean,
Format.
every one of us, I am assuming, especially with 5 people tabling this thing today, I would like to think that part of it is that we talk to people other than just when we sit in meetings. You know, I mean, that's the
do.
input that I would like to think we get is people call us up. I know, and
They
that's,
do.
and you know, those are the interested people. We get phone calls, we get emails, I read them, I listen to them, and I suspect that all 5 of us have heard that, and I don't think there was much discussion at all about tabling this thing tonight. And a lot of it had to do, I'm assuming, with input we've received and looking at it and thinking, you know, when we're hearing this, there's a better way to do it. For me, that input's a lot easier than at a public meeting with people getting red in the face and telling us we're idiots and what we don't know. But, you know, that's up to everybody.
I mean, I'm okay with an agenda item, you know, if, to discuss this in particular.
Do it at a work session.
Do
Just
a
do
work
it at a work
session, yeah,
session.
and allow people to speak.
And maybe we have, I mean, I think that your quarterly meetings, you know, we still have the opportunity to do that later. Do you know what I mean? Like, get this taken care
There
of.
should be more of general topics
And
that
it-
aren't on specific legislation that you're working on
I didn't know that
right
that was
now.
what, but I know that that was your goal for,
And I have the feeling that we have some responsible people who can come in and say, you know, I'm speaking on behalf of a fair amount of people. I think we have
So anyway,
one of them in the
we've-
audience
we've-
today.
We see that May 8th, probably 5:30 on the work session. That would be the last item on the work session for May 8th, if you guys want to do that.
Sounds good.
Next Tuesday at 5, basically around 5:30, I think. Nah, 5:15. Good job.
and then we can still schedule another quarterly.
Too early, Mike? Is that what you're saying?
If you're gonna notify everybody, that's only a week for everybody to coordinate their schedules if you want to come in here and have a
On the
discussion.
15th or?
That's the fall.
Yeah. And then the
You could do it in
regular
between
session.
the public hearings at 7.
Emily, do you want to schedule another meeting? Would you like a?
You gonna have food? Well, that's a long time to be here.
Yeah,
You don't just have to.
You wanted to hit the 15th then instead?
do it in between the work session.
Between the work session and the public
Public
meeting,
hearing.
the public hearing on the budget?
I mean, that's 2 weeks, that gives.
That's fine.
that's a-
Mike, you think that's better?
Better than a week, absolutely.
Okay.
So the 15th.
Well, that's probably gonna be later than 5, I would think. Don't you think?
I know what happened.
Well, we can rearrange the,
Wasn't working just a second. It was all messed up.
your priority right now has got to be your budget.
Yes.
I have to keep saying that because.
Correct.
All right, 5 o'clock on the 15th.
Sounds good.
Mike, you think that's a good time?
And with the database that they do have, they can get out to.
You think 5 o'clock, though, is okay for people? I mean, okay. All right, good enough. All right, moving on. Approval of an ordinance repeal of Eastern Boulevard Road Fee District Program.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move that the mayor and city council approve an ordinance to repeal the Eastern Boulevard Road Fee District Program. Over the course of the 14 years the program has been in effect, the city collected $369,605 in road fees from new development in the district to help defray the cost of the $5.2 million road widening project in FY '08-09. Property tax revenue from the new development at this point more than covers the annual debt service for the road widening project. The mayor and city council have determined that continuation of the road fee program is no longer in the best interests of the citizens of Hagerstown.
Discussion? Now, I've had some people reach out to me and ask me, you know, you're giving money back to the developers here, and I said, no, that's not what this does. What this actually does is to create an area where we have taken a field that will hopefully spur economic development in the Eastern Boulevard region. So, and then after I explained that they were okay, but the paper, when they printed the paper on the article the first time, was just, yeah, so. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Approval to apply for the Maryland Criminal Intelligence Network Grant.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for mayor and council approval to apply for the Maryland Criminal Intelligence Network Grant, which replaces our former Safe Streets Grant. The goal of this grant is to focus on high-priority offenders within our community with an emphasis on criminal networks and enforcement. This non-match grant has been offered and awarded annually for the last several years. It would provide salary support for a crime analyst, program coordinator, law enforcement overtime, and overtime funding for the Washington County Sheriff's Office for collaborative enforcement efforts.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Approval to apply for the gun violence reduction grant.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for mayor and council approval to apply for the gun violence reduction grant, known also as ceasefire. The goal of this grant is to focus on reducing and preventing gun violence within our community, with an emphasis on removing illegal guns and arresting gun violence perpetrators. This non-match grant has been offered and awarded annually for the last several years. It would provide law enforcement overtime for investigations and proactive enforcement details addressing guns in our community.
Second.
Discussion? Okay, let's be clear, it's not taking guns away from people, it is removing illegal guns and arresting gun violence perpetrators. Anybody else, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Approval of purchase of 2 vehicles for police use.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for mayor and council approval of the purchase of 2 vehicles for police use. These vehicles will be purchased from Forrester Lincoln, Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, for a total of $53,500. Funding will be from HPD's vehicle CIP account number C0129.
So these are used?
No, these are new.
Second.
Discussion?
Just have one quick question. How often do we get our vehicles maintenanced? Like on a regular maintenance schedule? Like,
Yeah, we do them in-house.
I saw
We
the
do,
maintenance
we
hours.
utilize, we actually utilize the dealer, we buy Ford vehicles, it'll be Hagerstown Ford or whatever, up until the warranty expires, and then where our shop does it for other maintenance.
Gotcha.
So.
Just curious.
It seems, maybe I'm wrong, but usually when we get these things, they're always attached to a state bid or something like
This
that.
isn't in the state bid.
Is there a reason why not?
I think we had to replace 2 vehicles pretty fast. Is anybody back there? Is the chief's there? Yeah.
Yeah, I thought,
New vehicles, replaceable fleet, they're new vehicles. We're very frugal with the funding, so.
yeah, I thought they were used.
Yeah,
Oh, they
that's
are
what-
used?
Yeah, that's what we were gonna ask why they had
Thought I was
2015
looking
on
to
this
see
back
that.
here.
They've been sitting on the lot.
Oh, so that's why I asked about the maintenance.
They are
Okay.
15s, okay.
If I could resubmit for new, I would prefer.
Thank
You can sit down if you could.
And that explains why I wouldn't go to the state contract.
There you go. Yeah.
That's, I thought they were used it when I saw it, okay. See, I actually look at this stuff.
Good job.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
And I would note, I'm impressed, I don't remember us ever buying used vehicles.
We do for some undercover cars, we've purchased some used. Okay, we'll leave the special session, move into our work session, have a couple proclamations this evening. First is going to be National Bike Month and Bike to Work Week. Ed, you want to come up? Rodney, is he still here? You want to join him?
Hey, Sean, how you doing?
Yes, sir. You're alive, Tell him I said that.
I'm always glad that we have like a front row. Like, these guys are fun.
Okay, proclamation for National Bike Month, May 2018, and National Bike to Work Day, May 18, 2018. Whereas millions of Americans engage in cycling because it is a viable, environmentally sound form of transportation, as well as an excellent form of physical fitness. And whereas National Bike Month and National Bike to Work Day increase public awareness for bicycling, educate the community about the benefits of bicycling for transportation and recreation purposes, and encourage people to try bicycle commuting. And whereas the city of Hagerstown now has over 54 miles of shared use paths, bike lanes, and designated bike routes, where cyclists can visit our parks and historic neighborhoods safely by riding a bicycle. Now therefore, the city of Hagerstown proclaims May 8, 2018 as National Bike Month and May 18th of 2018 as National Bike to Work Day, and encourages all citizens to participate in our Bicycle Advisory Committee's events in May to help raise awareness and promote health in our community. The city of Hagerstown encourages citizens to recognize the importance of sharing our streets with cyclists and encourages citizens to utilize the city's many bike routes.
for you. A few words.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Rodney, the city staff. They've been so extremely supportive for the committee over the last year. I don't know if you noticed, I mean, most of the work has been done through grants, so they've done a fabulous job. So, I mean, we've been able to put in, I mean, I don't know how many miles of bike lanes now, but it's 54 plus, we have a few coming. And so I'll leave this with you guys so you can look at it, but we have a full month of events this year. We do have one ride on the 12th with elected officials. There's 2 at the table, and maybe we can get Lou out there too. We're still trying to recruit the mayor, but I'm not holding out much hope on that one.
You go.
So we also have like a Benny's Pub ride. We have the annual Ride of Silence, which does the 10-mile loop. It's done in silence to honor the people that have been injured or killed in bike accidents in the past. We also have one with the Crumpy's Donut Ride. So if donuts can't get you out there, then I don't think we're going to get you on a bike. So one other thing I'd like to mention is we also have the Amateur National Road Championships. We actually beat out San Diego. We're going to have the national championships here for 2 years in a row for almost a week of bike racing. So this year it's going to be July 24th through July 29th. It's going to have hundreds of people brought into the community in the next 2 years. And this is really nice because it's younger. It's like up to 11 to 22-year-olds. So it's not just the cyclists, but it's going to be their families also, some coming from as far as the West Coast. So thank you again, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Sean, you want to say anything?
Just thank you for all the support, and appreciate the council having us out today. And I think the Bike Month is a very good thing to kind of get everybody involved and remind people of the great job that we do in Hagerstown and keeping everybody safe and out there riding.
Very nice hat you got.
Hey, thank you, thank you.
You want to get a picture of yourself?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll get you to move to a right. There you go. Oh, there you go.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, can I hold?
Definitely.
Look at that.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Let me do one more just for safety. 1, 2, 3.
Right now, look at me.
Good job.
One last thing is we do have part of Bike Month. We have a bunch of these signs you'll see coming up going around town. Advertising this, but also a lot of people don't know that now is a 3-point passing law that's been enacted in Maryland. So we're trying to do that. A lot of people just don't know that law.
Great job, Ed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
I also have a proclamation. Proclamation for Building Safety Month. Blaine? Anybody else you want to bring with you? Don't be shy back there, guys. You can come up. Jimmy? Jimmy Sprecher? All right, proclamation, Building Safety Month, 2018, May 2018. Whereas the health of our community and safety of our families depend on the timely maintenance, improvement, and safety of the homes, buildings, and infrastructure utilized by our citizens in everyday life. And whereas our confidence in the structural integrity of the buildings in our communities is a result of the dedication of professionals such as building safety and fire prevention officials, architects, engineers, builders, inspectors, design professionals, laborers, and others in the construction industry who work diligently to ensure the safe construction of buildings. And whereas the International Code Council, a United States-based organization, brings local, state, and federal officials together who are experts in the building environment to create and implement safe building codes to protect us in the structures where we live, learn, work, worship, shop, and play. And whereas Building Safety Month encourages our citizens to take the appropriate steps towards ensuring our structures are safe and recognize the countless lives saved due to the implementation of safe building codes by our local and state agencies. Now, therefore, I, Robert E. Brugge II, Mayor of the City of Hagerstown, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2018 as Building Safety Month and encourage our citizens to share knowledge, practice safe building methods, adhere to appropriate building and electrical codes, and keep those in our community safe and secure. And I'll present that to you. Thank you, Mayor. Say a few words. You, guys.
just like to say that as inspectors for the city of Hagerstown, our focus is on safety. And Building Safety Month allows us, provides us an opportunity to partner with the community to raise awareness for building safety, building codes, and for energy efficient buildings.
There's going to be some educational pieces added. The first one will be about installation of swimming pools, because this is the time of year where that starts to happen, and people need to be aware of keeping away from power lines and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to be rolling out some information about that.
Oh, no.
So to add to that, we'll have some flyers for pool safety to start out, so we hit the season before the pools are installed. And then we'll have some mailers for home safety and that sort of thing to go out with the buildings.
Cool. Good. Thank you very much. Eric, want to get a picture?
There we go. 1, 2, 3. I'm just gonna do one more. 1, 2, 3. Good smiles.
And last but certainly not least, Washington County Teen Pregnancy Prevention Month. And I'm going to ask Carol Laurie, Robin Robertson, and Major Warren, please join me. Go ahead and do the whole. Carol is a community advocate, Robin is a community free clinic, and Major Warren is a community free clinic community liaison. How are you?
Good. How are you?
All right. Say good and bad news, huh?
Yeah.
Proclamation, Washington County Teen Pregnancy Prevention Month, May 2018. Whereas, while Washington County's teen birth rate has declined over the past 21 years, in 2016, Washington County had 113 births to teens aged 16 and younger, giving Washington County the third highest teen birth rate in Maryland. And whereas teen pregnancy may be caused by and contribute to a multitude of social and economic issues, including lower educational level attainment, higher unemployment rates, poverty, reproductive health education issues, overall child well-being, and other risky behavior. And whereas nearly all teen pregnancies are unplanned, with teens stating they did not anticipate getting pregnant or causing a pregnancy. However, more teens are abstaining, and most of those who are sexually active are using contraception. And whereas in 2017, Washington County had 766 reported sexually transmitted infections, chlamydia, gonorrhea, primary and early syphilis, to teenagers aged 19 and under, which is an increase from 2016. And whereas taxpayers spend approximately $25,000 additional costs to support a child of a teen parent through increased public assistance benefits, lost tax revenue, and increased expenditures for public health care, foster care, and criminal justice services. And whereas a group of collective partners in Washington County advocating for teen pregnancy prevention is working to ensure that educational programs, services, and community resources are available to our youth, giving them the power to make informed decisions. And whereas nationally, the month of May has been recognized as Teen Pregnancy Prevention Month to raise awareness of the consequences of teen pregnancies and its effect on children, families, and communities. Now, therefore, I, Robert E. Brucci II, Mayor of the City of Hagerstown, Maryland, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2018 as Washington County Teen Pregnancy Prevention Month in Hagerstown, Maryland, and encourage all citizens to work together to reduce and prevent teen pregnancy for the future success of our young people. And I'll present this to a few words.
Yes, thank you so much. The Community Free Clinic for the last 9 years has operated clinical services for youth in Washington County between the ages of 13 and 19 who seek sexual health care. We do a myriad of services to include contraception, STI testing, HIV testing, education. Lots of kids come in and just want to know what's going to happen if I become sexually active, how do I prevent a pregnancy. So we cover really any kind of sexual health topic. In January, we expanded the program to include up to 24 years old because we realized that even though kids turn 19, they are facing even higher risk issues in young adulthood. So we have expanded the program to include drug awareness, date rape, sex trafficking, drugs, drug prevention, alcohol prevention, all of those. So our program now serves 13 to the 24-year-olds who we believe have high-risk behaviors, who are facing situations that would potentially be very dangerous or life-threatening. We were blessed to be introduced to Teens Have Choices when they opened, and they asked us to come on board to provide clinical services. And it's a program that we're very passionate about because we know how much a teen pregnancy can affect the life of a young adult. We, at one point, had a 9-year-old in Washington County who gave birth, and that is a crisis. So anything we can do to help youth and young children even to be safe and be aware of the risks that are out there. That's really our role, to help protect them and teach them and educate them so that they can be aware of what they're facing and what the risks are. So thank you for your support. We appreciate it.
Just very briefly, we asked for the proclamation today because as a county, although our numbers are going down, we have hovered on the 3rd and 4th worst teen birth rate in the state now for years. So we have a lot of wonderful organizations out there working to impact the issue, and we just wanted to make sure that that everyone knows that it's still an issue, that we cannot give up the fight.
I'll just add, Major is our teen liaison. Through his work, we've been able to get into the schools, which has been a challenge since we started this program. He does all the outreach in the community. He travels to all the outlying towns and cities to raise awareness and to get the word out. So he does a ton of outreach and PR for this program.
Amazing, it's been tough to get in schools.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care, Okay, next up. It's like a loan request for softball dugouts at Fairgrounds Park. Rodney. Good afternoon.
With me is Mike Kelball, the director of the Hagerstown Fairgrounds Softball Association, and they have a proposal. They would like to request a loan from us to build some dugout shelter structures.
My name is Mike Kelball, and I'm president of Hagerstown Fairgrounds Softball Association. We have a lease with the city for the care of the fields and scheduling at Fairground Park. We've been there at Fairground Park since the very beginning, since the park built. And we're here today to ask for a loan. We're in need of dugouts. What we do there, we have assorted leagues that play there. On the weekends, we run girls softball tournaments, and we bring in teams from everywhere. We had teams from Canada, and the dugouts would definitely help us. They bring tents in. Once the wind hits the tents, they're flying around. They break up, and they leave them there for me. So, and when it rains, there's very little shelter there. It's very little place for them to go get shelter. So the dugouts would definitely help us for shade and to protect them from weather. And we're requesting $16,000. Actually, these dugouts are $6,000 to be made. I have a friend that played in the church softball league, which I'm a president of too, the Hagerstown Area Church Softball League. They're going to make the dugouts for us for $4,000 a piece.
Mr. Mayor, I'm all for that, with history of being very responsible and paying back all their loans. And however finance figures it should be done, I don't have a problem.
I don't have an issue so much with the loan as much as I may have a concern when you look at this picture, I mean, dugouts present a different, opportunity for activity in the off hours. You know, they provide for hiding spaces for individuals. They provide, obviously increase opportunity for graffiti and vandalism. So I just look at it in those terms and have a curiosity. Have we experienced that in other parks? And if so, what can we expect, you know?
Well, the good news is it's all fencing except for the roof.
Yeah, that's always a
It's all
concern,
see-through.
but
Yeah.
The bench.
Mike's proposal, that actually is just fencing, so that you can see through it because of that very
And
reason.
it's 8 foot high in the back, so it would keep people off of it, and the only graffiti they could do is on the roof, I
Right.
would think.
Okay.
And to his question about the other parks, that, I mean, do we have any sort of vandalism or graffiti that we,
From time to time, and
are they these kind of dugouts? This open?
No.
No,
They're different.
Yeah.
I
they're
obviously
block,
don't play sports.
Concrete block.
we got it.
Okay.
Some of the little leagues, we've had problems like that, so I think this is a good design that addresses that issue.
I think it's a
Yeah.
great idea, and
All right.
I'm really pleased to hear you're getting traffic in from that far away.
Yeah, we did a survey one time, and, so one weekend I did, there was 160-some rooms rented out for 2 nights, and that's what we're doing every weekend there. We're 10 straight weekends, 10 to 11 straight
Traveling
weekends.
softball teams are great.
Yeah.
It's huge. It keeps us busy. I mean, sometimes it
doubt.
rains 4 o'clock in the morning, we're there, pumps, taking it off because we want those games to be played, because the town loses if the games are canceled, because it's, you know, they're in our town, they're spending money in the restaurants, they're in a hotel and motel, you know, it's a good thing for the city of Hagerstown.
So we may like rain, so the city, we actually might want it to rain, so.
No, I don't like rain.
I know you don't, but
My wife's
maybe
telling
the
me, get up
city."
at 4 o'clock in the morning, go prepare the field so those games can be
Oh,
played. So,
gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, I think it's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
So we
guys.
have
Thank
a
you.
loan agreement
Thank
that you approve on the 22nd.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Oh, I know this.
Michelle.
Hello. I am going to change up just the order, if I could, for a few minutes, because while Rodney is here, we wish to jump to a capital project item that is in our proposed fiscal year 19 budget and just talk a little bit about this project and about the funding for this project. We're in a position with the urban improvement project right now. The city's portion is a plaza, and Rodney is in the midst of getting ready to actually issue and put out our formal RFP. And before we can do that, one of the things that we need to shore up is make sure we have adequate funding source identified and that everybody here is good with a proposal that I'm going to share. So first, I think in the packet, I did include, it is actually in your budget book as well. It is in the capital improvement section, section 8, and it's page 117. And it is a detail as of a couple months ago, what our current vision was for this plaza. So I'm just going to turn it over a little bit to Rodney to letting me talk about the plaza because I feel like we haven't done that in a while. And then I'm going to talk funding sources so that Rodney can still get out of here for his other obligation.
So the first thing that, that we are responsible for is the undergrounding of the overhead utilities. So if you go behind the Maryland Theater, there's a whole myriad of wires that are the responsibility of City Light, Verizon, Antietam Cable, and various other ones. There's like 7 altogether. So the first thing that we would do is advertise a contract to install a conduit system in that area that would allow those utility companies then to remove their aerial wires and put them underground. That contract we would like to advertise now. We'd like to come back to you around June to have you approve that. That work then would take place over the rest of the year. That's going to be happening hand in hand with the Maryland Theater and BISFUS contractors doing their work in that same area it's going to be a coordination exercise, we'll just say it that way, that we really have to work together to make that happen. Then, after the BISPA project's done, after the Maryland Theater project's done, after the university's project's done, then the plaza would be constructed sometime in 2019. And we would also design that in-house, and we would advertise that probably towards the end of this year for construction in 2019. So the funding for this first phase, this underground phase, would be $300,000 grant from the
Strategic Demolition.
Demolition Fund that allows us to do, it's basically doing preparation for a bigger project, and that would be in line with undergrounding utilities.
The other portion, so Rodney is coming to us now with this project, and we certainly understand our role and how critical it is to go ahead and get all these things done at the same time and to get all of these wires, if you would, underground. So the city's funding for that portion was going to be a city bond financing. We are currently, if you remember, a few months ago, we had come and we were doing a small $1.5 million bond. Happy to say that actually next week I will come on Tuesday, May the 8th. That process is almost finalized. We will have money in hand. That $1.5 million did not include any portion of this plaza project. So one of the options that I have available and would like to recommend is that in April of 2015, we issued a series of bonds. We did a tax-exempt and a taxable bond. As part of the taxable bond, we had included $650,000 for, at that time, what the city was going to move forward and do plan-wise at the MELP location. After all of that happened, plans changed. We didn't move forward with a purchase agreement. We didn't need it. So now we have this money still here in a 2015 bond that was going to be utilized first and foremost for MELP. Any proceeds that we had left over were then going to be converted and go to our wastewater division to Grow project. So we have a project there with our wastewater plant where we signed a contract. It was a 10-year contract, and we had agreed to do $1 million a year for 5 years to upgrade the plant. And what I'm coming to you now to say is we haven't needed to utilize this for the MELP, for what the city's portion and what we're currently doing at the MELP. And I have talked to our bond counsel. We would need to come back and do ordinances and resolutions, but we can reallocate or reprogram, and it's approximately $655,000 today because we have accumulated interest, and go ahead and direct those proceeds to be utilized here if everybody at the table is okay with moving in that direction. The city is still working on our portions of the MELP. And just because I know not everybody sitting at the table was part of that, the city was able to receive $500,000 basically from developers, and the city is going in, again, this is not city property, but the city is going in and utilizing that $500,000 to do the cleanup, the demolition, and such. To date of that $500,000, we still have a remaining balance of $174,000. So after talking with Mike Spiker, we both believe that the remaining $174,000 that is remaining of that is sufficient to cover the remaining portion of what the city is required to do there. So then the question is, we have the $655, it's perfect timing, we've had it, it's in an account, and we need to utilize it. It's a taxable bond series, so there's no issue with utilizing it for this, because again, where this plaza is in this initial work, it's not city property. We do not currently own it. So we cannot get a tax-exempt bond to do this work anyway. It's money we've already been paying the debt service on, but we do have to get it utilized. I can't just leave it sit in my bank account. So if this body is okay with that, we would come back again, and we would do an introduction of an ordinance, adoption of an ordinance, followed by a resolution, so we can just reallocate that money. And then as Rodney needs it throughout the whole entire process of the plaza, he'll already have it.
So you won't be issuing a bond for $1 million?
Not at this time.
Okay.
But when all other projects and everything else is shovel-ready, and we're ready to move forward with another big bond issue, we would do the difference between the million and 650 or
Gotcha.
655.
Next year.
Or if for some reason Rodney says, hey, we got more grant money and we don't need all of that,
Right.
then,
Okay.
but again, if he comes back, he may come back and say, Michelle, you know what, in addition to the 650, I need $500,000 next year in order to
Right.
finish the construction of the process, so.
Let's try not to do that.
Yeah.
So noted.
Yeah.
Last meeting, we were talking about the $200,000 shortfall, or the additional $200,000 that the theater needed for construction, or for the program. Is this, putting the utilities underground, was that an afterthought, or was that part of the plan?
It's always been part of the plan. Matter of fact, at one time, Rodney came to us and says, it's not gonna work because it is so expensive to do as you look at the figures. Having said that, you also need to go where we're talking about undergrounding it and realize the amount of poles and wires there completely defeat the whole concept of what we wanna do. And looking at this thing, first of all, I have no problems with it all, the financing. And I would just note this, you know, there was a lot of criticism from a lot of people about the cultural trail. You know, why'd you spend all that money on that thing? And the answer to that was always, it's not that, that's the beginning. And Marty Brubaker said it over and over again where you sit, that if we're going to do this thing, we have two choices: either really do it right or have it be a total failure. And I'm really impressed. I know it's expensive, but again, I would reiterate, anybody who questions whether we can pull this off without undergrounding the wires, you really need to go back there and look at it, because I just don't think it works. You can make everything look pretty as the devil, and it's going to be ugly the way it sits there now. And I just think when this thing is done, and the news we got today about the Maryland Theater, the bids were approved, right? So we're actually, you know, they're actually gonna do it. It's rather incredible, and as far as raising money, Maryland Theater is gonna find it a lot easier to raise money than we ever would to underground wires. You know, it's not a very sellable item, so I think it's just gonna be amazing when it's done, and it actually looks like this project is gonna happen.
Yeah, I'm not arguing at all.
No, I understand.
The concept of putting wires underground, I think, you know, they definitely have to be, but I'm trying to get my hands around the whole Maryland Theater development process, and we keep talking about, well, we need another 200,000 here, we need another 100,000 here. Do we really know what the total outlay is going to be for this project, or is this, you know, for the duration of the project, are we gonna keep having to find money elsewhere?
For the Maryland Theater project or for the plaza? Which is
Well,
Or for the
I'm looking
entire-
at the whole urban development plan there, the plaza and the,
I think the Maryland Theater now has bids, and I think they have $1 million contingency they've placed on there, which is probably wise when you're tearing into something that old and that complex. So I think their budget's set. The number it's in the CIP is our estimate based on the concept plans that we have at this time. We don't have construction drawings done, we haven't done any bidding yet, but that's our cost estimate at this time. BISFA, I know those bids came in about a week ago. They haven't publicly announced where they stand on that, but what I heard was they were favorable. So I'm thinking that's going to move forward here very soon.
So I think from the outset of the UIP and its various names that it's been referred to over time, at least for me, politically speaking, the easiest thing has been to fairly consistently say, the city's kicking in $1.5 million for, you know, a $40 million project. I mean, that's sort of like the political tagline that your average city, you know, elected member can use. And so I think, to your question, I think it'd be important for us at some point to understand, you know, just how far off from that general political statement are we? You know, do you expect that it's gonna be 2.5? And that's fine for me, I'm not speaking for everyone else, but if you told me tomorrow, hey, Chris, you know, really the line that you want to say is, you know, 2.5 for 30 million, whatever that is, because I'm all in on this item. It would just be good to understand.
So originally, I think we start with that same concept of the $1.5 million, and that is what was in our budget, and we had it in a project called downtown redevelopment. And then since the whole urban improvement project has solidified and moved forwards, the project itself right now, correct me if I'm wrong, Ronnie, Maryland Theater, BISFA, USMH, and this plaza, those are all parts and components that's been designated. The city already committed and did a motion originally to give $500,000 to the Maryland Theater for its portion of the design, so that's $500,000. The remaining million we put into this project. So if you look in your budget book this year, you're no longer gonna see downtown redevelopment. You're gonna see the $1 million in city funding in this project. So that was the city financing the 1.5. However, the reality of this project staying at just $1 million to do the underground construction and moving all the wires and then doing some construction of a plaza.
Be optimistic.
It's gonna be more than that, but we're looking for grants. We're
Right.
looking for all types of other funding sources. We were lucky to get the strategic
Kathy's done a
demolition.
tremendous job going after grants. She's already landed a couple, and we're applying for more, so.
Right.
And we'll continue to do that because we have
And
time.
Do we have a rough estimate, being asked the one end of it with the city contribution, do we have a rough estimate on the total project cost for all of it? And when I say that, I would include in that project cost the, new student housing, because that's directly related to the physician's assistance program. So when I'm talking cost, I would include that. I don't think we'd be doing that but for the physician's assistance
Correct.
program.
Do you know that, Kathy?
So,
I don't know the total off the top. Yeah.
Right, I
We'll
would
get
just
it for
look
you.
at 30 million, 40 million.
What can we expect?
and just to note, so this project right now, as it stands and what's reported at these meetings, it does not include a parking deck. So the numbers that we're saying right now, again, are exclusive of a parking deck, an additional parking deck, but maybe even the most recent funding matrix that group does, and then we could add any additional city costs.
We'll send that out.
Yeah, I'm just curious, because Kristen makes a very good point when he says $40 million investment, and this is what the city's putting in.
The only other question I have or point to make is, I'm assuming, and I'm glad you mentioned the parking deck, because I've said this over and over, you know, throughout this process, is I think that getting to the point you made that, you know, that Marty once made of doing it right, I continue to believe that if all of this opens up and happens as it's happening, without a parking deck closely behind it, I think it will be short-sighted. And so for me, I want folks to understand clearly, I'm still all in on a parking deck on that, you know, the Columbia Bank lot or some area there too, in association with this project. I just don't think you can make it happen successfully without it. And I hope that whatever we do with the undergrounding of electric, plans for not just what's there now and what those parties expect to do, but also what the courthouse and its expansion and a parking deck in construction will need from that as well, that we're not moving it twice.
Right, we have talked about that.
And we do, within our 5-year capital improvement project plan, under the parking fund, have a third parking deck.
Good.
It's just not, right now, when you see the information on the overall urban improvement project, that all the partners get together to discuss, a parking deck is not currently part of those conversations, as part of that plan.
I do think this
Just-
project is going to change the entire face of the city.
Agreed.
In an amazing way. And when the Maryland Theater is done, it's, we're gonna be attracting people from a whole wider area. I am convinced, once this Maryland Theater is done, and people from the city come up here, and they're gonna find out that that's a venue of choice if they have that choice.
And more events, that's what's
Right.
really critical too.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so.
We're okay with
Doing it, yeah,
Yes.
moving the
changing.
money?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah,
I'll go
and it
back and
sounds
talk
like
to
you got
bond
Real
council and
support on the project too.
do all that, but that means Ronnie got the green light.
Yep, and I'll be back with the bids in June.
That's great. That's fantastic. It's unbelievable
Thank you.
that's gonna happen.
It's exciting.
Yeah, well, I know when we originally talked, it was just not gonna happen, it was just too expensive, but it's got to.
It's been a lot of work by a
Either
lot
we
of
do
people.
this or we don't do the
It's
plaza.
really been a great community effort.
Yeah, it really has been. Thank you, Rodney.
Which is why it's great.
So we're back this evening, and basically where we left off was last week, we discussed moving forward with property tax, and discussed that we got an agreement for me to move forward with running of the public notice. So right now, the public notice that's in the paper literally is going to state an overall 3-cent real estate tax rate increase for all categories except apartments, and in an apartment category would have a 5-cent tax rate increase. And so that information, we sent it, the last things I did on Thursday, and I was fortunate Donna stayed late to make sure that that happened and had Harold Mail lined up.
It was in yesterday. It was published
You
yesterday.
confirm, okay. So we're within our time period.
So, correct, we're within our time period, and of course, Valerie has asked that we come back and that we kind of start the meeting at the same point, because while we did get the nod, and I was glad that we had a majority agreement on how to advertise, here's the hard question. It's May 1st, we're gonna be here the 8th, and we're gonna be here the 15th. On the 15th, you're gonna have a public hearing. At the public hearing, we're gonna introduce the ordinance, and the ordinance is gonna say 3 and 5 cents.
Yes,
So are we gonna have a 3
Yes.
vote?
I will vote yes.
I'm a no. And I don't want anybody out there to take that no as some kind of grandstanding of no tax increase. That's not why I'm a no. I just believe in a different tax structure for the increase that's being applied. So,
And because I'm new, and private, no, because I'm new, yeah, I know. I just want to understand something. So like in my business, if I would raise prices, I would like look through everything else. And I know that there's a timeline, but it seems like, if I would like raise prices and not look at where I was spending things to see if there were cuts. So it seems like, I don't know, maybe that's the government way of doing things. It just seems a little bit backwards. So
And
just explain, if you could.
My explanation would be that it starts with the city administrator telling the department heads, this is what you're constrained with.
Yes, and what
you
we
need
did
to
was,
cut
we put them
everything.
back to fiscal year 17 numbers, and so they did do cuts, and they cut capital, and they cut everywhere that they possibly can. And that is where we got to the point at which we can't find anything else unless you're completely eliminating a service, which would go along with staff or whatever else that means. Unless you're eliminating a service completely, this was the difference. So that was as far as we can get, so.
And if you keep the services the same as we've had them, it costs more money because of our union contracts.
Exactly.
Salaries go up, and we happen to know that our assessments have gone down. So, you either trust staff to say, because we undoubtedly can nickel and dime stuff, there's no question about that. But when it gets down to trusting staff to say, if you want to go further than this, then what you need to do is identify to us what positions and/or services you want to cut. And at least that's the way I look at it. Other people may not, but I have the faith in staff that they've cut it as
Councilman
much as
Alshire
can be
said it
cut.
correctly. I mean, it's wages and benefits, that you're a service provider. That's you're providing services, and that's the bulk of it, and that is the majority of the increase. That's where your taxes are going. That's part of that. And then capital is the other piece of it, and we've deferred capital so much. We got to a point where if we're gonna continue to do things in our facilities and our equipment, we can't defer them any longer. So that's where we were with that.
But I agree with you that in my business, it's the same way. And, to your point, we've looked at things. I think going down the road, though, we seem to be in, I can't conceive of sitting here next year and not having the same discussion about how many cents are we gonna raise it.
You're probably right if the assessments don't go up. I would just note one thing, and there's different ways of looking at things, okay? There's a common thing that you hear, whether it's local government or federal government, by God, and especially here at election time, we need to start running government like a business. You know, if I'm at home, if I gotta cut this, I gotta cut that. And I would only say this, government is not a business. Business is run for one reason and one reason only, and that's to make money. Government should be run for one thing and only one thing only, and that's to serve the citizens. So there's two ways to look at it. In a business, you say, I can't make these expenses, or I have to do something. I don't have a choice. I only have so much revenue I can raise, and I either gotta cut expenses in this business by laying people off, or I gotta raise my prices. I gotta do one of those two things. We're faced with a different issue. We're faced with the issue of, do you want to increase revenue to supply the same services that we have supplied, or do you want to save money by cutting services? Because again, it gets down to, when you look at the budget, you can go through page after page, and we have discussions like we had with the capital improvement project here, but it all gets down to wages and salaries. If you're not gonna lay people off or furlough people, you're not gonna make any dent of any substance in the change. And we also gotta keep in mind that just to keep to the same revenue level that we had last year, we have to raise taxes. And you're right, Austin, we had to do the same thing last year because of the decrease in assessments. So if we don't raise taxes to at least do that, I mean, you have to figure out how to do that. That's your choice, is lay off people or.
And I just like to be clear when we use this term, raise taxes. We're
Right.
not
Raising
we're
taxes.
adjusting the tax rate. When you talk about constant yield, you are adjusting the tax rate to some figure that the state assessments office, which you're not associated with, has come up with to determine the value of the properties within your jurisdiction. And so I just, you know, when you hear that term, and I go back to this point last year, if I look at my tax rate, my tax rate, as it applied to the value of my property, and I believe 2005, last year I was still about $67 or $68 to the good, okay? Which means $67 to $68 to the good last year, paying less than I did in 2005.
Yep, and I'm the same way.
So if I apply this rate, and I think this is what is easier for people to understand, if I apply this, and I think it should be 2 cents for homeowners, but if I apply the 3 cents, the 3 cents to me roughly equals about $36. So even if you apply this 3 cent adjustment, because of the valuation of my property, I believe I'm still, whatever 68 minus 36 is, 32 bucks, am I right there? I'm still like 32 bucks to the good.
Right.
Not counting the adjustments that have been made for the differential on the county side. And so that I think people should keep in mind when they're looking at these articles about discussions about tax rate increases, because we have them in such a discussion of awe, and at the same time, really the only thing that has actually went up as far as the city billing me are the business utility side items over that same period. My water and my sewer and my trash, parking rates, things like that that are a business-driven fund to do so. But nary a single person sort of talks about those things with that same level of awe that we talk about general tax-supported fund services, a huge percentage of which in this city happen to be police and fire, and that's just what the bulk of it is.
And not to sound stupid, but you know, we heard the Alexander House today at our luncheon with the crab cake sandwich at 99 cents back when things increase in prices.
The second thing I think that is important for citizens to hear
because, I was having this conversation actually today in another jurisdiction, where, the politics of the moment are, well, let's just cut everything by 3%, or let's cut everything by 5%, which is just a completely lazy way of governing. But when Lou or Valerie talk about, you're talking about decreasing services, meaning physically laying off officers or public works staff or furloughing individuals, I think that it's important for our citizens to understand that the reason that we talk about it in that context and not just simply an across-the-board 3% is because you have wage and benefit agreements with numerous employee groups. And so it isn't like you can just go back in, and I guess you could, if you wanted to embrace that political quagmire, you couldn't go back and just say, you know what, I know we agreed to this, but we're going to cut it back 3% across the board. I mean, you don't have that ability. So you have to actually physically say to those groups you have contracts with or wage and benefit, agreements with, that you're actually going to have to reduce the actual number of personnel as your action, or furlough, that personnel as your action. It isn't as easy as saying, we're gonna hold your wages static, because you have these agreements that you have in place that don't just talk about wages, they talk about all those ancillary things that go along with it within the agreements.
And to piggyback on all of that, when I first sat here at the very beginning of February, we were almost $3 million deficit, 2.7,
Well,
2.8 million.
Yeah, I was very surprised when you said $700,000.
Right.
Because my calculation showed 2.5 million. I was like,
That's why I'm saying we worked very hard and.
So those couple of weeks in February, it's not that others didn't already look at the spending and the reduction. And then we do have to acknowledge absolutely, you are a new member sitting at the table.
Yeah.
And so others have already been through this book. The mayor has already, questioned things, and several others have. And so let's talk about that. Let's take a look. First and foremost, let's take a minute to look at let's go to section 1 and go to page 7, because this is a chart that literally looks at from fiscal year 10 to fiscal year 19, what the city has done in the way of employee wage adjustments. And I'm just going to take you straight to the bottom of fiscal year 19, because one of the things that happens in very few private organizations any longer, except for maybe healthcare and manufacturing world, is that we here have 4 collective bargaining unions. That's a blessing sometimes and a curse sometimes. And the blessing goes without saying. The curse is, so we've agreed to these contracts. We've literally agreed, and they're in place for 5 years. Not only is our union contracts driving the wages, it also heavily drives the single largest employer benefit cost, and that is health insurance. So the unions and the union contracts speak to that, and that is by far the largest share, 67 to 68% of all expenses in the general fund. But so for fiscal year 19, for all non-union, and non-union includes your full-time, it includes managers, but it also includes a host of other staff, command staff and police and fire. And right now, in the fiscal year 19, there's a proposal to move 1 step on the salary scale as of July. IBEW is our electrical workers, and they have a union contract in place where we've already agreed to do a 2% cost of living adjustment for those employees. ASME 1540 are our utility and our public works, plus some of our civilian staff in police. I have a 1540 member in accounting. There's some within engineering, some in Scott's area. And so their contract, which is already in place, is a 1% COLA, and we're going to give them an additional step 25 because we have people, their salary scale is 24 steps, but they have people who have been here 25, 26, 27 years, and they haven't got a raise because their contract stops at that step and that's all that they get. So part of the agreement was to add a step 25, and it is a pay increase for those long-term employees in that union group. That union group, like the non-union group, is the largest groups across the city. So the non-union and ASME 1540 both range about 130 to 133 full-time staff people. ASME 3373 is our sworn police group, and again, that contract is already in place, and basically when we say steps unfrozen here, the ASME 3373 last year in the contract implemented a new salary scale. It's a 15-step salary scale. So once they get to 15 years of service, that's it, they're maxed out. But what's going to happen on July the 2nd, everybody that has been here long enough and based on their longevity will move another step, which is a pay increase. And then again, because the steps are unfrozen, so say I'm a sworn officer currently sitting on a step 13, but in September, I'm going to have hit my 15th year. So in July, you're going to move me one step to 14. I'm going to get that pay adjustment. And then in September, on my anniversary date, I'm going to where I need to be, and I'm going to keep moving every year on my anniversary date. And then the last group is our 1605 IAFF, and that's our firefighter group, and contracts are currently in negotiations. It is the lone contract that currently expires on June 30. And the only group that isn't resolved, all these other union groups, their contracts go through, I want to say 22. So again, there's a lot of history here, but the things that are in place with those signed contracts, we cannot undo. All of the groups impact in the general fund with the exception of IBEW 307. All of their staff is strictly in the electric fund. And then the ASME 1540 group, like I said, there's about 130 to 132 people, and it's split just about 54 to 46% general fund and utility group. This does not include any of our part-time staff. Part-time staff, there is a new July 1 minimum wage increase goes in place that impacts several of our part-timers. So several of our part-timers are going to be increased to the new minimum wage. Also, with the sick and safe leave, our part-timers are now getting 40 hours of paid sick time, which we didn't do in the past. And also our seasonal staff. And some of them, again, are impacted by this minimum wage increase. So, again, some of the information on the wage side. See that in dollars, just in the general fund?
And I would note, especially with fire, with police, and unfortunately now with fire, the union contracts, they make us competitive. It's almost impossible to hire police anymore. Yeah. And firefighters we're finding is getting to be the same thing. So it's not even a matter of us being overly generous. Police are very difficult to hire. Everybody wants police officers.
So then in section 1, we're going to go to page 26 because this is the revenue side. So the other thing that's a little unfair to try to compare government to another business type, even our water and our wastewater side, is water and wastewater. Here at this table, we have the authority to raise our rates and charge for services to meet the expenses, just exactly what the three of you do every day in business. When it comes to the governmental funds, like the general fund, we're very restricted what we can do and enact as a municipality to generate revenue. So on page 26, it shows the different revenue sources. Property tax revenue, and I'm going to look just at proposed fiscal year 19, so that third column. Proposed tax revenue, $30.6 million. That is 68% of all of our revenue source in the general fund. And so the way that we can influence the property tax revenue, and 68% of our revenue base is by finding a way to help grow or annex, finding a way to help our assessable base and our values go up, to help sustain that source. Because in a lot of these other categories, like income and other taxes, 3.7 million, we can't control any of that. That money comes from income tax, it comes from hotel motel tax, it comes from state and fire police aid for protection. A lot of this is driven by the state and or county and is allocated back to the city. Licensing and permits, almost $2 million. Again, that's something that here at this table we can control. But as we look to make some changes that we've talked about, I think I even pointed you to that page in section 3, I think it was page 9. A lot of the licenses and permit revenue that we receive is through our code administration department. Intergovernmental revenues, $445,000, that is all grants. So when it says intergovernmental revenues, it just simply means not necessarily money that's being allocated from the state back to us, but other things that we're doing. And this specifically, the majority of everything in the $445,000 is the remaining balance. We had 3 separate COPS hiring grant initiatives over 3 separate fiscal years, and it hired 9 new officers, and all 3 of those were on a declining basis where they would pay us so much for each new position. We were required to keep those positions. The grant period was 3 years plus an additional 12 months at 100% of city cost. So we're to the point in fiscal year 19 where we're going to be receiving the very last of our dollars reimbursed for those positions. Charges for current services. Again, there's a page in section 3, and it's probably page 9 or 10, but it'll detail some of those things out for you. One of the items that's in there is a cable franchise for about $400,000. Some of those things we can control, but not all. Fines and forfeitures. The majority of everything in fines and forfeitures come from 2 areas within the police department, and it's our speed camera program, which is also called our Safe School for Speed program, and the new red light program that we're looking and just started implementing in March. The administrative allocation revenue. So I want to take a minute to stop and point us to that 1.9 million. And Mike Spiker isn't here, and if he were here, he would sit here and he would tell you he is the director of the utility group, electric, water, and wastewater, and he provides to the general fund the majority of this $1.9 million in administrative allocation. Recognizing that the city administrator, mayor and council, accounting, IT, that there is a host of other people that help support that group, and that it's all made up in the general fund, so we transfer that monies over. So if we didn't charge our utility group that, there's another $2 million we would need. Yes?
Just to bring a point up that I brought up maybe, I don't know, 5 years ago now, was the application of the utility tax. 'Cause what we do in the city, and Scott got me the numbers, thank you, is we charge our utilities, and there's probably 25 of them, in this jurisdiction, and we get a statement from the state for their personal property valuation. So it's a valuation of the utility as it applies to the percentage of that utility's value within our jurisdiction as it applies to the overall value of the utility. We do not get a property tax bill for that utility. So think of the various types of utilities that exist within your jurisdiction that occupy property, but you only get a personal property valuation of. And when I looked at that and looked at what we do, is we charge the personal property value and not the property, so you miss the property tax. And when you look at that number from our water and sewer department, 1.9 million, all of those other 25 utilities combined within this jurisdiction pay about $940,000 in taxes. So our utilities are at least twice that. What I have recommended back then, and would only recommend that we look at again, is that you apply a combination of your two taxes to those entities which occupy property, that you don't get a property tax, and it equates to about $350,000 in additional revenue. It's not a significant sum, but you know, if you think of the impact that those utilities have on your public property, especially in areas of your right-of-way in which work and things like that are always done, you know, and services rendered and resources devoted to, you know, I don't think that that's an unreasonable ask to go back and reevaluate, you know, just what level of impact that is. So, just a thought.
So in the property tax revenue, the 30.6 million, the majority of all of that is real estate, which is the tax rate that we've been discussing and discussing and discussing. To Councilmember Alshire's point, we also have corporate personal property tax that is inside that number, and it's about, I want to say, overall right now, about 2.7 million of this. If you are a utility company, instead of like other businesses, instead of getting a real estate for the land on which you set and getting an assessed value for that, plus having to pay a corporate personal property. Now, on corporate personal property, the individual businesses actually get an annual return in a form, and you fill it out and you complete it. So for instance, if I'm a physician's office or I own a healthcare environment, I might not have to pay real estate taxes because I'm tax exempt. However, I do have to acknowledge my infrastructure, and I self-report. Every business self-reports. So the assessments on corporate personal property across the city and across the entire state are self-reported by the businesses within the state. They have a separate tax rate applied to personal property, and that's 2.5 times what we set as our real estate tax rate. All of that's in the book, and we can go to that. But again, so when Councilmember Alshire mentions, aside from everything else we've been talking about with this two-tier tax real estate rate, on the corporate personal property side, we have the ability to charge a different rate for utility groups and such. And that's where Scott and he worked on numbers recently and identified the 25 current utility groups that reside within city limits. The last couple contributions and donations typically are a very, very small amount of what we do. Again, we're not a 501c3, so a lot of times, you know, people like to give donations to good causes, but if they're a 501c3, it's automatically, you know, one of those things that I can write off on my tax return. You can't necessarily automatically do that for the city because we're quasi-government and we're not exempt under IRS guidelines as a 501c3. Also, I know changes are coming with tax reform, so not everything that everybody gives as a donation may actually get written off. But again, kind of towards Councilmember Metzner's comments earlier, a lot of people aren't going to line up to give us donations to help us simply get rid of wires and underground them.
Have we asked? Have we asked some of the nonprofits in the area? You know, we don't have to demand it or expect it, but have we ever thought about asking for donations from some of the nonprofits?
The idea of expanding a pilot program across all, yes. We haven't done it, we've thought of it.
I mean,
I think you need
just
to-
a thought.
I think you also need to incorporate governmental entities and quasi-governmental entities like Washington County and the school board.
I mean, just to,
What you'll be
I
able to
mean-
do for the stormwater management utility fee.
Right, we will do that through the, no one will be exempt with that. They will all have to pay.
I mean, never hurts to ask, right?
That's right.
Right. Interest and then other unallocated general revenues, the big things in there are typically, you can look at that. It's things like sale of assets, rental income. We get a little bit in rental income. It's not a lot, but again, you can see it's only $281,000, so it's not large. And if we want, we can go to that page right now. Transfers from other funds. Now, I do want to point out, because, the comment is, how do we know next year, this time, you're not going to be sitting here saying the same thing? So I said we started with about 2.7 million deficit, and that was February 6th. Before I came on February 6th, the deficit had been larger than that, and we had already worked on reducing it. So we got to 2.7, 2.8. This transfer from other funds within that category, it's $600,000. That is not typical. So when we went back and we took a look at the health insurance fund and our fund balance policy, our health insurance fund had a surplus in fiscal year 17. And the monies that go into that fund are from the general fund, electric, water, waste, or from all the funds that have employees across the city. We are able to return that surplus back to the funds, and it amounts to a little over $500,000. So in my revenue sources in fiscal year 19, I already have a one-time $500,000 source that I really hold no hopes that we're going to be able to identify next year. And then last is just appropriated use of fund balance. Again, that's not new revenue, that's just us reappropriating what was in our fund balance to utilize towards expenses. Then, let's flip to page 28, because that is our expense side of the house. So at the top, you're going to see total wages and benefits, $30.2 million. That is an $848,000 increase over the prior year. It is driven by health insurance costs, retirement pension costs going up for the state of Maryland. Again, that's dictated by the state of Maryland. That is not something that we control or can dictate. And again, by everything that we've approved in collective bargaining unions. So the $30.2 million is 67% of our total expenses in the general fund. So if we want to say staffing is off limits, then there's 67% of our costs that we're not going to be able to touch. If we look at some of the other categories that come down the page, if you literally look at the percentage change, you're going to see from fiscal year 19 budget to fiscal year 18 budget, really, there's a couple other increases other than salaries and wages. One is in contracted services. So contracted services, we have at a little over $5 million for fiscal year 19 budget. And in fiscal year 18, it was 4.4. The largest drivers there, we have some stuff in grounds maintenance costs, but the biggest driver is on our trash and recycling contract that was just renewed in January. We enhanced that contract, our contract expenses went up, but likewise, our charges for services, when we increased our quarterly fees to our customers, also went up. And then last, I think in there, increase-wise is in the legal fees, because we have a new legal fee contract. And then the other increase is down in capital transfers to other funds, 3 from the bottom. $843,000 in the proposed budget compared to $146,000 in fiscal year 18. This is monies that we're utilizing to do capital projects for everybody in the general fund. Of this $843,000, the majority of it is projects for fire and police. So of that amount, of the $843,000, $783,000 is for capital projects for police and fire. Oh. So if we're not looking to, if we're looking to defer again on capital projects, then am I going to look at my police chief and say, crime cameras are a priority, but I have to cut, and so that means we can't do as many crime cameras, or we can't do your vehicle replacements, or...
But I think it's important for people to understand that that the myriad of line items in that second half of this page table are largely one-time items. These aren't items that if you say, you know what, I'm going to take that $800,000, I'm going to take it down to $250, and I'm going to hold it at $250. I mean, you sound like a hero, but the reality is that's a one-time notion. And you may say, well, I'm going to keep it at $250, and you say, okay, well, the only way you keep it at $250 is I'm going to put off you know, more than half of those items that are one-time items, to the point where you become a reactionary entity of replacement by failure.
Which we have done.
Yeah,
And we have
oh, yeah.
become.
So
That is where we are.
We have to get
You know, look at
out.
the-
Eric didn't get his street sweepers until they broke.
Well, look at the top two categories or top two lines, and I mean, they're the story. I mean, they just are, and that's, you know, that's just a reality, because those are the only two that are guaranteed recurring and increasing lines by agreement.
Correct.
And when you go back to one page before that, and you see the 30 million is 2 million more, right? 2 million more than what you're, a million more than what you're bringing in property tax. And then you go to page 27 and see that 23 million of that, 23 million of that 30 million is in two departments, you know, and you're not, I don't think that there's the political appetite. I don't think that there's the citizen appetite to look at that and say, well, you know, how do we decrease that in some manner? Because no citizen wants to hear that we're going to decrease police or fire, and there's no body, you know, there's no part of a body that's going to do that. I just go back to the item of fire, and I know the chief's sitting back there, and I say this over and over. We need a change in the relationship. You know, if we're going to be a paid, you know, fire system entity in perpetuity, then we need some change in the political recognition of that kind of relationship and how that occurs. To be able to afford it, you know, as equitably as we would like for our citizens, would make up 26% of the population, you know, of this county paying for it.
So we need to have some discussions with the county, specifically with fire, about why are our 6 fire companies not getting the additional half of the funding that the other county fire companies are getting. And I know the county's position is because of the property tax differential, but it's
That's not included.
Yeah. I had a nice
That's not part of the equation.
I had a very nice conversation today with the county commissioner at lunch today, who Emily has communicated with, who made it very clear to me that he is very open to having a discussion on the very issues we're discussing. And it was interesting when I talked about mutual aid and mentioned your theory about only sending our volunteers. He said, well, you know, mutual aid is mutual aid. And I said, you've got, I understand, and I
He's
point-
confused.
No, understand, when I pointed out to him what you had said about, hey, we're all members of the county, and, you know, that's the county. He said, you know, nobody's ever said that to me before.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, you know, why would somebody in the county say that to him? And he was not a member when we were having these discussions. So there's somebody who was very open to having a conversation about this and indicated Roy didn't understand those problems and did not understand why fire is not involved in tax differential.
When are we ever gonna have the conversation?
Well, I sent the
After
email.
November.
I know.
I sent the email to the commissioners and Rob Slocum and asked that we have this conversation sooner than later. And Rob did say that they were working on a presentation to give to us and that we are supposed to host the next meeting. So county staff was supposed to get in touch with city staff. And I said that I understood it was election year, but that we didn't run to play election year games and that we need to have a conversation now. So he seemed open to it.
So we're just waiting for that invitation?
But it's a conversation I've been wanting to have for 3 years.
It happened before
Been
November.
trying to have.
What did you say?
I don't look for it to happen before November.
But I would say that we could request it to happen before November.
It would be nice to try to do it in July,
Yeah.
because we're not gonna get it done in, between now and.
Yeah, I mean, it's not
the
gonna
budget.
affect this
Yeah,
fiscal
we're not, and we're not gonna get it
Yeah, I
done
don't see
between
what
now and the
hurt
budget, and then
is.
there's the MML and Mako conventions. So it's, to get everybody together again, once the summer hits, it's very difficult.
Problem is, though, it's, you know, right now the county is approving their budget, and the answer is gonna be it's not in the budget.
Well, it's not gonna, there's
It's
no
not
way
gonna
it
be
would
this
affect this
fiscal
year.
year.
That's why I say, there's no way, and there's no way anybody has time to get together before the budget
Yeah.
season is over.
But we all meet on
My only fear is
Tuesdays,
We get
so-
into the next budget cycle and we haven't had the discussion.
That's why we need
I
to try to
think-
do it this summer.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you're right, Austin, it comes up at this time and it's
then
like,
there'll be
it's too
another
late, yeah,
reason.
yeah.
There'll be another reason
Yeah,
why we
we're
can't
trying
have
to
the
do it in the
conversation.
summer. The summer's a slow time. It's a good time to try to get us all together.
So we're waiting for them to reach out, or we reach out again?
Well, now, what Emily
They are
just said,
working on a
that Rod said that we're hosting, we hosted the last one. I don't know why we're hosting.
No, they
Yeah.
hosted the last one.
We went to the county.
We went to the county last time.
The Maryland
Oh, we
Theater
did, that's right.
presentation and the
Yeah.
drone
Yeah,
presentation.
you had the guy come in and we never got
That
a
was
follow-up.
it.
What-
Yeah.
What
So-
happened with the drones, Mayor?
I haven't heard, I haven't got an update.
Okay, I would be
Turn it over
curious
to
if they
the
ever, yeah.
agencies that were,
Counties
Be
will
curious
work.
if they ever did anything with it.
But we could have that, we would have that joint meeting,
Yeah.
and as I wanted to have the tax differential discussion on our first meeting with the county, but
But, yeah, I think.
absolutely,
I think we need
Have it
to
this
to
time, don't
push.
we will,
you'll get it.
we will.
We need to push for the meeting to have the discussion so that this time next year, we're all on the same sheet of music, the same thing.
No, you're absolutely right.
Same thing with hotel motel tax.
I mean, we
That
have
is
to be on
definitely
the
a
same
question
page.
that I'm gonna ask at every county commissioner camp forum that I go to. Is where do you stand when it comes to, you know, fair and equitable, tax set-off for, you know, citizens of Hagerstown, Maryland? I
And it
mean,
has to be, a different calculation. Hagerstown
Right.
cannot be thrown in
Like
the same
Boonesboro,
tax
Waynesboro,
differential,
no.
because there's,
Alright.
we provide a different level of services for our citizens, and it just has to be something that's unique to Hagerstown.
And I suspect that we've really hit on something with the fire. It is not a shotgun approach. It is a very directed, focused approach on saying, you have a responsibility for this expense, and it's not even included in the tax differential. Because if we could get the fire expense included in the tax differential, it would make a huge difference.
Yes, you're right.
Make a huge difference. And also, right now, it's also the time when everybody's recognizing that, you know, it has become the elephant in the room that nobody wants to discuss. And that's what it all gets down to. And it can be much more focused, therefore, than trying to argue that we're not getting enough for this and we're not getting enough for that. Just argue fire and get that on the table and say, explain to us how you can do this. And I think the answer is that if that is your answer, that we provide a service that we shouldn't get reimbursed for, then the answer is, I agree with Kristen, we should limit our responses to volunteers only. The same service that the county says we should give to our citizens. We'll never get there, but, I mean, something's gotta give in this game.
all right,
Great.
Sure. So the mayor's giving me the wrap it up sign
Yes.
because we spent longer, but I feel like we needed to.
Mhm.
But again, it's May 1st. So where do
You
we
need the
stand with the
answer.
3 and the 5? I need to know because we
know.
need to cover economic redevelopment fund. We need to cover parking fund. And I really want to hit some of these capital projects. And to sit here next week and say, okay, I'm back to discuss property tax revenue.
We do need to know where the majority stands on that rate, because we have to finish general fund.
that's the only way I saw it.
And just as importantly, staff needs to know if you don't agree with 3 and 5, what do you agree with?
Yeah, I mean,
Because
because
just,
if cuts
just
have to
having
be made,
everybody
we have
say
to do
that we
it.
don't agree with something ain't gonna work.
Right, so we need to know what is the change that the majority at this table is willing to do.
So I think I agree with Kristen. I would like to see 2 for homeowners to show that we don't want to increase, the goal was to encourage homeownership, but also saying a 10-cent increase in 1 year in one category, I think is just, that's a lot. That's hard to swallow. So,
Yeah, I agree that the number
10 is hard to swallow, but if you apply 2 and 10 to those structures, you're still talking $486,000 to the non-apartment at 2 cents, which is twice as much in actual money generated than the $226,000 at 10 cents, the remaining 4,000 classified as apartments.
There's still a huge
So,
difference.
so in other words, I hear us talk about the number 2 and the number 10, and they look like a big difference in numbers, but when you talk about actual money generated, it's significantly different in terms of money.
Yeah, that's because you have so much less of the rental
Well,
to
I
go
mean, you
for,
got-
so you have to raise the taxes that much more.
If four,
In the same respect.
my estimation is 4,000 units.
In the same respect, you know, I sit here and I thought the other day, I've lived across the street from a duplex and down the street from a quadruplex that I don't think have ever had a fireman or a police officer there in my life of 65 years. And I'm guessing that if we take a look at a lot of these apartment complexes, we're gonna find on a per capita basis, it's very similar. So I'm not yet sold on the fact, the more I think about it, that apartments necessarily require per capita more services than residential.
And if you're trying to be exactly perfect, when I did the math on the sheets that Scott gave me of the actual roughly 4,000 apartments, it's 2.5 and 6.5. It's really like, 0.25 and 0.68. And everybody then, every unit across the board in this city pays roughly $34 in increased property tax. If you had to apply it to a per unit basis then, that's about what it comes out to.
Which seems
But
fair.
I don't think that gets us this 776 number that you're
Yeah,
looking
the
for.
2 and 10, we're still 60,000 short of what we need.
We're gonna save money there.
About the 2.5 and the 8.
Which is 783. But then there's still a big, I go back to Kristen's point where it's 603,000 for single-family residences and 180 for the it's not accomplishing what your point is.
Well, no, because I look at the dollar figures. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the only way to be fair when it comes to taxes is to take every single living unit in the city of Hagerstown and add a tax to every single living unit that makes up that difference.
I'm not opposed to 2.5 and 6.5. But you say, oh, short, oh, gosh.
Then you take half the property tax and you apply it to the utility tax and you make up the difference and then you're even.
What does
Just
that
a
get
thought.
us an increased,
Right?
tax for,
Say that again?
business personal property?
Say that one more time, I'm sorry.
What does that get us in increased revenue for business personal property tax?
Well, keep in mind, business personal property is self-reporting.
I
And it's
understand.
based on book value. So every year, if they do not continue to invest in capital and infrastructure, their book value of their assets decrease. So
Right.
the assessed value goes down.
It's based on the valuation. The state of Maryland is unique in that it's based on the valuation of the company as it grows as an entity and the percentage of the valuation of the company within your jurisdiction.
As long as they self-report that.
That's right.
Okay.
And the state checks that.
Okay.
What was my suggestion? Half the tax rate to utility, 0.65 and 0.25. What's that?
Then the mayor.
That gets you about 50,000 to the good, right?
So if we do 2.5 cent overall, 6.5 to apartments,
Mhm.
and then doing a separate tax rate for utility companies
At
on
half the
personal
property
property.
applying.
And
So
what
half
would
the
that?
0.941.
Half of it should.
Because 376 is the total, half of 376 gets you about 175. And if you're 60,000 short, that gets you about 100,000 to the good. And you could take it down to 6 cents and 2 cents, whatever you. Those are just thoughts.
So we'll come back next week and we'll start with this topic.
Oh, gosh.
Unless you got somebody, or unless you got a majority of 3 and 5.
And this is, and so we have really, we have 2 more weeks before a public hearing, and we want to make sure that by the time we get to the 15th, we know what this is, because we want the public hearing to be, we want the comments that the citizens want to make to be relevant and applicable to
what
what
you're
we're
actually doing.
really going to do.
Because we'll be showing you your ordinance and your budget at that
Right.
point, at that public hearing.
So I'll have to make changes and adjustments, which we can.
It's 3 and 6.
So
And I just have to say, you know, what's gonna change between this week and next week as far as people coming up with what they think we should do?
Well,
This has been the third week.
This utility, like, I need more information on this, like what, this just came up 10 minutes ago.
And
Is that-
can we tax that this year?
I mean, is
It's
that a
not in the
realistic?
advertisement, is it?
I guess I don't understand.
It's not in the advertisement, but it is listed out separately within our ordinance.
we would have to list it out.
When you do your ordinance, you list each of those taxes that apply
Yeah.
to those various types of entities.
Yep.
So you're saying, can we review the utility?
Yeah, like what,
tax again?
what would be the consequence of that? What,
Yeah, I don't even
Your
understand.
utilities would pay more.
okay.
They would pick up a portion of this overall amount. In other words, you're trying to get to this magic number of 776.
Yes,
And so they would pick up roughly about 176 of that. And then your 600 then would be split between your property and your rental at roughly then at 2.5 and 6.5 at like what, 400 and 200, right? 400
Our
and 200,
utilities?
600 plus
Our
176.
No,
utilities.
not ours.
No,
Our
just-
utility, our city
No.
utilities pay us.
Okay, that's where I
Pilot
didn't
No,
think.
these are private utilities.
Approximately 25 utility companies, and utility as defined
Okay.
by the State
By the
Department
state.
of Assessment and Taxation. That's not
Got
what
it.
we define.
I was
as
just trying to find a way to
utility.
spread it across
Give us some
everybody.
examples,
Yeah.
if you would. I know
Tell me
CD's
got
on.
it. Verizon.
AT&T,
Thank
the
you.
Potomac Edison Company, Columbia Gas, Level 3 Communications, Block Line Systems.
So those types of utility
types of
companies
utilities.
that are located within the city of Hagerstown boundaries. So they do not pay real estate tax. They only pay corporate personal property or business.
Well, this is new information.
That's not the first time I brought it up.
Was I here?
No.
Okay, fair enough.
Several years in a
You
row
did say
that we
you're
did.
new.
I did, I definitely said I was new.
But we have the ability to add a rate on top of the business personal property rate.
We have the ability to set a different
Different
rate
rate.
for them than we do for all other corporate personal property. And I'm sure that there would be a cap, that we couldn't just raise it indefinitely, but I do not know what that cap is right now.
So do other municipalities do that?
Yes,
Yes.
some.
There's a handful.
City of
Myersville.
Oh, Myersville does it.
Myers,
We do.
yeah, Myersville takes real estate, real property.
So does Salisbury.
Personal property and adds it together.
Salisbury's a good example.
Salisbury
Salisbury.
does 2.85%, or 2.85.
Times.
2.5 times.
So their, whatever their real estate tax rate is, 2.85 times that is their corporate business property tax for the utility companies that reside within the city of
They
Salisbury.
do it a little differently. They add a little more.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why I was offering the half to get us. to
Well, they add a
zero.
little more than the 2.5, not a little more than what.
Right.
They're
Are you
combined.
gonna say something?
Friendsville is 4 times. But Friendsville probably only has
That
3
doesn't sound
utilities or
friendly.
so.
Way too small.
They pay 2.85?
Overall total, and I have to go back and look, I might have got it almost to 3 million in the fiscal year 19 budget. That's all businesses though. Of that portion, how much is just these utilities?
65. This is a roughly an even 30,
Yeah,
couple bucks.
over half of it. That's
Every unit in the city, everybody's paying pretty much an equal amount.
that's why.
And, yeah, it's a little bit the utility.
I guess I just don't
to get you to
understand
the end.
why it wasn't done before, I guess, I don't know.
Well, there is, I mean, they gave us a big equation sheet of all kinds of options.
No, this other, this, I'm not
Ow,
saying that.
There was not an interest.
There was an interest of the
Okay.
body.
So what am I missing, like where is the?
That's what I'm saying. What
where's
are-
the
what's the
pitfall?
consequence of
Yeah,
that?
where's the,
Well, these
The bad
utility,
things.
these,
Last
Well, they're gonna pass it
year-
on to the
last
ratepayer.
year- Yeah, it's gonna pass on to the rate.
No different than a franchise fee that we have with Antietam Cable. I mean, let's face it, our citizens in some form or another are paying
are
for
gonna pay.
accessibility.
Our two largest assessed utilities, Verizon and
Columbia
Columbia
Gas.
Gas. That's 29 billion assessed out of 40 billion. So it's well over half for just those.
So, yeah, that increase will likely be passed along to the customers.
Which it would be in this situation anyway, if we, you know.
Oh, no, it's a better situation. I don't
So
have
how
gas.
are people,
Pardon me?
I don't have gas, so it's much better.
I do.
what are people gonna hate us the worst for, raising their utility bill or raising their property tax rate?
Well, they won't, the utility bill is so indirect that, but just as good a question is, are people gonna be any different about finding out, patting us on the back when they find out that
Well,
we're
we're not
getting
gonna get
two and a
it.
half,
No.
2.5 cent increase instead of a 3 cent increase?
You don't do this to get pats on the
No,
back,
no,
do
no,
you,
and
Lou?
I haven't been
No, I
doing
understand,
it
Kristen,
in
I'm
that
not-
mechanism. Mine is to say,
I
what is
understand.
the impact of the average user of
Right.
services on the budget?
Oh, I understand.
And that's my calculation.
I don't think anybody has a problem with the utility rate issue, or the utility issue. From what I'm hearing, I don't.
I don't.
Well, that
So we have.
that solves the shortfall of the 2.5 and 6.5
Let's,
then.
Well, you agree with
can
the
we
2.5 and
resolve to
6.5?
give
Yeah,
Michelle an
I got
answer
you.
tonight before we go home?
I think we should.
I think we should. She's been very patient with us.
Very patient.
I think we should give her an answer.
I agree, because I don't think anything's gonna change.
So what's on the table? We're talking
Whatever gets
2.5
me
to 6.5, and then what's the utility deal again?
We'll have to,
You were talking
we'll
about?
have to, what do we
Half the
figure?
property,
Half the property, okay.
or some,
The increase would
Some
be half-
calculation
half the property, which is
similar to what, like
the
Salisbury does.
majority of others do.
Half the property
Other
tax,
municipalities that do
Please say
that,
something.
that's what most
Smoke
do,
is
is
coming
take
out.
some sort of percentage of the real property on the utility.
and add it to
Okay.
the personal property tax.
That's correct.
Go.
Is this going to discourage businesses from coming here?
It may.
That's my,
you mean utilities?
yeah.
Utility companies from coming here.
I mean, I guess we already have them.
They could always relocate. Could AT&T pick up tomorrow and run a place in the county? Absolutely.
But
Can
they could go
anybody?
to Friendsville
North
or
Howard would like that.
Myersville or Salisbury, because
Correct.
they have it too, so, you know.
There's some jurisdictions that charge
Way more.
taxes on the poles and the telecommunication wires that run within their municipality on top of that.
So they'd be maybe hard pressed to find somewhere else.
So if Michelle and if you can calc these and send it out like you did, you know, before next week, when you
Okay.
do the calculation.
Or you have, like, and I'm
Yeah,
not an
we don't-
advocate,
we
but you
don't-
have the simplicity of the 3 and 5 there. I'm just,
I'm
not advocating
I
that.
would just say we definitely need
feel like
more time to double check the corporate
that's where
personal
you're down
property.
to.
I would
Wasn't
rather
total
do
for
3 and
2.7.
5 instead of having to save a half a cent and then risk businesses moving out when we're already known as business. I just think
Utilities.
this is a.
Utilities, yeah, not.
Okay, I get that, but for half a penny is, I guess, let's look at the numbers, but.
Well, then they won't be giving Michelle an answer tonight, that's.
I was good with the 3 and 5.
I said
I'm
the 3
good
and
with the
5
3
the
and
last
5.
time too.
And you don't really have to
Apologize.
look at the numbers, because you can tell Michelle, make it so it'll work at 2.5 and 6.5. But I still, I think 3 and 5 is a much simpler, but I've said that.
If we have a majority for 3 and 5, that's where we'll move.
Can you at least give me the number for the 2565? And I just want to see it.
Yes.
I'm sorry, we can't give you an answer tonight.
You did.
Now, we have a whole,
You just told her 3 and
no,
5.
I didn't.
Well,
She
I
said it
heard.
last week.
Said
See,
it
this is
last
what
week.
I'm saying. So next week when I come,
Yeah.
it's none of this. Well, this is what I said last week, but I'm not saying it.
I will have the same message.
I know you will. Thank you for
But
that.
now, this whole, that's a whole new, it's a whole new concept, this utility thing. So now you've thrown in another equation.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I was just trying to cover the difference, the
Let me-
shortfall.
And let me suggest to everybody that, you know, as Emily says, we're talking about a half a cent, and I say that when you're bringing up, and Kristen's right, he's brought this up before, and I think it makes sense.
It's $6.
But I also think we're getting into this horror story of, yeah, we're a week before making a decision, and we're coming up with a whole new concept, saying we need to think about it. And I just think that the time to think about these new things.
July 1.
Yeah, it's, you know, we talked about a two-tier tax system last year at the very last minute. Instead of saying, let's talk about it earlier on, and so it got taken care of this year. I would suggest that what Kristen is suggesting makes eminent sense, and I would suggest we do it next year when we have ample time to take a look at all this stuff. And I would also sarcastically note that while we're very interested in meeting with all the landlords about what they think about our rental registration, I sure haven't heard anybody interested in meeting with all the landlords about what they think about our two-tier tax system.
We are public hearing night, May 15th. That's when they're going to be here, right? That's when our public hearing is, and it's a tax rate increase.
But it's a little different is.
Then I'm holding.
But I understand exactly.
Of course, yours is only 5, so they might love you. Pitch mine and then.
Well, you better get 4 votes, because I'm not signing anything that doesn't have 4-1 votes on anything but 2 and 10, so. Which means if it's 3-2, I'll veto it.
Which means we need 4. And we have
Yes,
2
you
weeks
do.
to do it. So I don't care how we get to 4 and what that looks like, just as long as we find a way to get to 4.
That's right.
Yep.
Because by charter, we have to have this done. Tax rates have to
So
be
you're
set
saying
every
if-
single year.
So you're saying if it's not 2 and 10, you'll veto it?
He's saying if it's not 2 and 10 with a 4
if
vote
it's
count.
3 and 5, and it's a 3-2 vote, I'll veto it.
What if it's 2.5 and 6.5?
I have to look at that number.
So 2 and 10, you're thinking that 2
I'm
and
2 and
10,
10 is
which
where
is
I am.
still short.
I understand that. But we're also saving $76,000 this year because we may not have to do $1 million bond issue for the UIP project.
Okay.
May.
Sorry, we can't answer you yet.
Okay, can we is there any consideration into having another, we don't have to wait a week to have another budget meeting? So you can have as many budget meetings as you want.
Well, I hope we're gonna talk about the parking fund.
And this is what I'm
We
saying.
would like to get-
There are legitimate things that we really need to discuss. We need to discuss.
let's talk about the parking
various
fund
things.
tonight
Have another
then.
meeting. Would you want to have another meeting?
Let's talk about the parking fund right now.
That's a big.
Yeah, we don't have that.
Subject.
That is the
How much
rate,
time do you think you need?
the rate increase and everything
But
on
we
that.
talk about that next week, right?
If we would like, we can
I
talk
heard
about
you say
parking
next week you wanna hit
Why
2
don't we
items,
schedule-
parking fund
Last year,
and-
we had a meeting in the
Yeah.
morning. Why don't
We did a Friday, I think.
Okay, why don't we do a Friday meeting?
Let's do a Friday at 7:30 a.m., I'm in.
7:30?
Emily hates that time.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, you come over to my
I'll
house,
see you at 9.
you chase
I do
5 kids
7:30.
around, trying to get them dressed at 7.
9 will be the time I'm leaving to go to work.
Friday
Then,
anyway.
I'll be here at 7.
I can do Thursday morning. I can't do this Friday, but I could do like next Monday.
Yeah, I can't do this Friday.
I could do a morning meeting Thursday or Monday. Thursday or Monday. Me too. I'm down with the midnight meeting too. That'd be better for me, but.
I'm taking, obviously.
You guys figure it out.
Well, I don't have my calendar in front.
You said 2 specific items, right? Parking fund, and what was the other one you said?
I would like to
Capital
discuss
improvement project.
an economic
So what do we
redevelopment
have
fund.
beyond
3.
that next week, budgetary meeting wise, to talk about?
Settle the general.
Well, my guess
Yeah,
is-
but it sounds like you've got that pretty much settled.
It doesn't sound like that to me.
Well, it sounds like you got 4 of you
No,
at
we
3 and
don't.
5.
We don't
Do I have
close
4
to
for
it.
3 and 5 right now? Emily? 3 and 5, yes or no?
coming down to me?
That's what happened to me
Because
last
I'm gonna do the same thing with
Because
Shelley. 3
then
and
that
5,
tells
yes
us
or
we
no?
can spend our time with these other 2 items next week.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I was fine with 3 and 5, but now there's new options on the table.
Shelley?
Which is exactly what I said, yes. I was okay with 3 and 5, but I like this concept.
To do the new concept in this fiscal year, or to try to look for doing that next year?
All right, you're right. I'm fine with 35. Fine.
There you got 1.
I got
got
one,
2.
I got 2.
You've had-
I was good with 3 and 5 last week.
I was good with
I'd
3
like
and
to look
5
at
last
this,
week, I
but-
can't go back, so.
So I got 4. Okay, so Mr. Mayor, we have 4. We'll do the numbers, we'll send out charts, and we will put it as an agenda item in July. The last time we had came and sat here after the budget, it was a July or August, there was no interest in even discussing it. So now at least majority says we're interested in discussing it. We'll have all kinds of information by then, right, Scott?
Yes.
That's great.
He left.
And
He's
so
like,
we
"I'm
won't
outta
need
here."
to discuss.
He's
the
probably
tax
going to
rate.
search now. Oh, there he is.
Okay, so next Tuesday, we got parking fund and.
Economic redevelopment fund.
Talk about the parking
And
fund.
capital improvements.
And we are
Okay.
done,
Not
we are
having
balanced,
those-
we are balanced with general fund. General fund will go on, we have our rate, and we have our finalization of general
We do
fund.
capital projects first.
Do we need, I was just looking at my calendar, I can do Friday if we need to have another.
We don't need
budget
to have
meeting.
another one if we're,
I mean,
if
if we
general
want to
fund
get
is
ahead of the
done.
curve.
As
with the
long as
parking
on May
fund.
15th, there's 4-1, we're good.
I see that.
That's right.
I will bring the chief afterwards in the parking lot, I'm just saying, chief, see back there?
You got the always the bride today, never the bride.
All right, thank
City
you.
administrators' comments.
I don't have anything.
Shelley,
And that was, excuse me.
comments.
Oh, yes. I would like to make a suggestion for a fundraiser to raise the $12,000 that we are spending to do the stadium study. And I know that the stadium study is a little bit of a hot topic, sorry. But what if we had a golf tournament at the city golf course to raise funds, get people from outside of the city to come in? We have the capability of doing a tournament there. Maybe we do a 2.5-day scramble, we get to promote the golf course, and we get to have a fundraiser to do, you know, to raise the money back. We'll never raise all $12,000, but at least it's something to help offset.
Be an interesting thing to see how many people want to do it. That should be a way to get it kicked off.
Will you golf, Kristen? Will you at least golf?
I mean,
Yes.
Kristen
That's
tries to
awesome.
golf, yes.
after you guys are through, I'll come in and.
I've seen him.
As long as I don't have to ride in the cart with whoever was driving on that video.
Well, that was me. Emily made me do it.
Part of it was Layla.
Layla did.
I mean, she's 10, so.
Right. And Emily made
We
me
waited
back
till
up.
staff couldn't see and then let her drive.
Yeah.
Most people that use that course do that anyway.
But I thought that it would be a good idea and a nice, you know, just something a little different. And maybe help get the community involved and
It's a good
promote the
idea,
course.
And promote the golf course too.
Yeah, so, just a thought. Not sure what needs to happen next,
I'll
but
drive the beer around.
yes.
And, I don't know if there's any sponsorships or anything we could get.
Maybe, yeah. I mean,
We have to
just,
watch
Would be the
that
most money
because
we've
they
ever
won't
raised
necessarily be
privately
taxed.
for a stadium in this community. I
Right.
can tell you that.
Because the city fundraiser is not like a nonprofit fundraiser.
okay.
Even if you raise $1,000, that's $1,000 more dollars you've raised than any prior effort.
Well, it also gets
Right.
citizens involved.
It gets people involved.
I'm just saying.
And gets some excitement.
Well, everybody.
And gets you excited.
Yes.
Put the word out to everybody who's in favor of the stadium, you know, if you play golf or not, come down and
Yeah.
support it.
Exactly.
Anything else, Shelley?
No, that's good, thank you.
Lou?
Michelle and staff, congratulations. Our financial staff is, again, has gotten an award of excellence. They're their caper, which is, it's routine in Hagerstown, and that is a real compliment that it's routine. Thank you. That's all, Mayor.
Awesome.
I was, had the honor and privilege of attending the Brooks House groundbreaking today, and I was absolutely amazed, pleased, I can't say enough about the support of the community, the people that were out there. That is something that we should all be proud of. I mean, you know, it's a tremendous feather in the city's cap, really, that we've got that kind of resource.
Thank you.
Kristen?
See Chief Brito's out in the audience, and I'll just say that
You know, when we brought Chief Smith in, there was a clear change in the dynamic of awareness, public perception of the application of our police force enforcement on activity that was occurring in our community. And I think that chief made a quick and good name for himself, and I would only echo that in your short tenure here so far, you have certainly held that same bar, because yeah, I can hear out in the community that there is a change in perspective and perception of how well the police force is doing in cracking down on those things that I think our citizens in general want cracked down on. So thank you.
Agreed.
Yep.
Last Thursday, I got to tour Kind Therapeutics USA. Yeah, sorry. They don't give out samples, but if you guys have a chance to go check this out, you really have to. It is like Fort Knox. I mean, good luck getting anywhere near it. They have 300 and some cameras. I mean, it's wild. But they have 25 jobs they've brought. They invested like $20 million into that building that's been vacant for 30 years. And they used all local contractors, and they're expanding as soon as the state of Maryland approves cooking and things like that. They're expanding to about 125 employees that are all being hired locally, so.
I had to laugh because I'm sure if you go into your average opioid producing factory, it certainly is not guarded to that magnitude.
Well, they're just handing out pills like candy. It's
That's
pathetic.
what I'm saying. It's
But
just funny to treat one substance
Hence the epidemic.
in that way.
Yeah.
And not the other.
Yeah. But it was really cool to watch what they do, but they're really invested into Hagerstown, and all he kept saying was local, local, local. They tried to hire all local contractors. I mean, they've done a ton of work there. I grew up in the South End. I watched that building sit vacant for my whole entire life, so it's pretty cool to see it growing
That
something,
building will be 100 years
literally.
old soon.
Yeah, yeah, that's all.
I mean, not saying you are, I'm just saying the building is gonna be.
No, I'm 32, thank you.
Yeah, right, right. Is that it?
Yep.
Is that it? Is that it?
Yes,
You done?
he said you did the ribbon cutting.
I still didn't hear, she's laughing too hard.
Kristen said you did the ribbon cutting.
I did, and it was great.
Go ahead.
Anyway, thank you guys very much for giving Michelle an answer tonight, so I appreciate that. So we can move forward and get this behind us and start focusing on some other important things that are coming up, so.
Thank you for your
Yeah.
I figured I would tell you where I stand.
you
It's
were
better to do that,
straightforward,
so,
that's right.
yep, better to do that. Anyway, because now if I don't sign anyone, this doesn't matter, it passes in 30 days anyway.
And right, when these folks come, we can all tell them, well, the mayor wanted a 10-cent increase, so you should thank us all.
You can tell them that, you can tell them that, yep, and I'm fine with that. Anyway, I too attended, the fake groundbreaking at Brooks House.
It should have been called the groundbreaking.
It should have, yeah, because he broke ground in February, actually. Yeah, Dave Ryder had some good days, and he decided he was gonna go ahead and break ground, but, listen, put your thinking caps on between now and next week, because Kevin's gonna be here. And, we gotta try to figure out if there's any help that we can give them, on this endeavor. And remember, we have a nonprofit locating outside the city of Hagerstown, but will service people from the city of Hagerstown. So instead of locating inside the city of Hagerstown. So I think that's important to keep in mind.
Already have all these ways you can spend it, right?
Yeah. All right, thanks, guys. See you next week.